in contact with genuine spiritual teachers who explain the second purpose of the material nature, or taking birth in this material world. The real purpose is it's a reformatory. It's a place where we can reform ourselves and go back to the spiritual world. And that's the real purpose of material nature. The phony purpose is we come here to be an imitation God. But the real purpose is we're given a chance to purify ourselves of two contaminations. The first contamination is a desire to dominate and exploit. And the second contamination is, as we succeed in dominating and exploiting, we gather many material things and we become so attached to them that at the moment of death, instead of thinking of God, we think of our material possessions and material relationships, and we stay hopelessly entangled in the web of birth and death, old age and disease. So this reformatory process can only be performed if we meet a bona fide spiritual master, bona fide gurus, shiksha and diksha gurus, and saintly persons who teach us the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, because these two books are specific for liberating person from the cycle of birth and death, and then accessing the higher levels of pure love. And those higher levels are explained in detail in the later cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but there are no English equivalents to translate those words. You have to understand them by descriptions, but there's no word, because in the material world, most people think of love as some sensual or sensuous experience. But there are very deep states of love, sometimes manifested, if you read the Ramayana, in the separation of Rama and Sita, which is called Vipralamba Bhava. They exhibited ecstatic feelings of love for each other in separation and coming back together. Or you can read, if you first of all, you have to, one thing is clearly said, the Bhagavatam must be read from the beginning, step by step, and going slowly, chapter by chapter, canto by canto, until we come to the 10th canto. If you read the first 9 cantos under proper tutelage or with proper instructors, by the time you come to the end of the 9th canto, you are purified of material lust, anger, greed, envy, madness, and illusion. And you're able to access the state called Brahmabhuta, a state of liberation even in this body, even in this world. Brahmabhuta prasanatma nasochati na kankshati samaksar visabhutesu madbhaktim labhate param. So this state of Brahmabhuta is that you no longer have sochati and kankshati. You no longer have lamentation because you had something and you lost it, and you no longer have hankerings for something that you don't have and you're desiring to have it. You become free of that, and you're no longer subject to love and hate, fame and infamy, heat and cold, riches and poverty. You remain neutral in all these states. Why? Because you're convinced that your goal in life is not to stay in the material world, it's to go back to Godhead, to go back to the spiritual world. So therefore you're not entangled by any false material egoism or false sense of proprietorship or false sense of domination. You understand that your real identity, and that is that I am the eternal servant of Lord Krishna, and he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now this first verse, the invocation mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, answers the fundamental question that was raised earlier in the Vedanta Sutra. The first sutra of the Vedanta Sutra is Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now let us inquire into the nature of the Absolute. And the beginning of the Bhagavatam answers that question. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. That the supreme, beautiful, and ecstatic Supreme Personality of Godhead is Vasudeva, the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. So that's Krishna. It states his mother and father, and it states who he is. So then it says Janmadasya Yata. So this is the first sutra of the Vedanta Sutra. After the first sutra is Atato Brahma Jigyasa, and it says the second sutra is Janmadasya Yata. What is the nature of the absolute truth? It's that from which everything emanates. So that's what Janmadasya Yata means. That from which everything emanates. That's the definition of God. So and Krishna also says, Maya dakshena pakriti suyute charastaram hitananena konteya jagat viparivartate. He says in the 9th chapter, 10th verse of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, that everything, I control everything material and spiritual, right? And this material energy is under my control. And therefore, he is the supreme architect, and under him are general contractors and plumbers and electricians. You know, you have the general contractor is Brahma, right? So he teaches Brahma all the mantras to transform energy, subtle energy, into matter, and then to interact the matter and produce living entities. Krishna injects souls into the material nature, and Brahma makes the different species. He's Prajapati, the Mahaprajapati, and his sons are also Prajapatis. They are producers of species. That's not only human beings, but all species. So, therefore, the one thing that's explained in this first mantra, in fact, let's read the translation. It says, O my Lord Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva. When we say Vasudeva, it has a short A. And when we say Vasudeva, it means Krishna, his son, with a long A. O Lord, O my Lord Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva. O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. So here, Brahma is the first created living entity, and he receives the instructions from Krishna how to put into action the material creation. Krishna creates the elements, and there are 8 fundamental elements expanded into 24. Bhumirapo nalo vayukam manu buddhirevacha hankara ityame bina pakritirastata. The 8 fundamental elements are earth, water, fire, air, ether or space, and then mind, intelligence, and the false ego. And those can be expanded into 24. But Krishna gives let's put it like this. There's clay, and clay is what you would call a substance. And then there's pottery, millions of different shapes that you can make with the original clay. That's called the categories of the substance. So Krishna is the substance because he has infinite energies and multiple energies and variegated energies, spiritual, marginal, and material. And he expands them infinitely. Therefore, Brahma, he receives, let's call it, all those energies, and then he's given the mantras how he can transform them into matter, and then it creates the 8,400,000 species of life, or living beings. Today, the scientists and biologists and so forth, they've only recognized 1.2 million species. Right? So what about the other 7-some million species? Well, the description of all these species is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, but these are species all over the universe, not just on the earth, right? And it includes not only aquatics and reptiles and so forth, and birds and mammals and human beings and devatas, but it includes species on all the different planets of the universe. And there are living beings on all planets of the universe. And the universe is not only the galaxy with this sun, it's all the galaxies put together. It's the space that is 4 billion miles in diameter. That's the measurement, according to the Vedas, of the universe. So, and all these species are created in the beginning of creation by Lord Brahma. So that debunks Darwin's idea of evolution. However, there is evolution explained in the Padma Purana, and that is evolution of consciousness. So if we have a very low consciousness where we consider eating, sleeping, mating, and defending as the ultimate goal of life, then we receive a suitable body of an animal or an insect or something like that that only does those four things. Right? But if you have a higher consciousness, then there are higher bodies than insects and animals. And eventually you come to a human body, and amongst the human bodies, most are uncivilized. But as soon as one follows the Varnashrama system of organized Varnas, social statuses and spiritual statuses, at that point one becomes civilized. But that's not the goal of life yet. One has to be civilized in order to be trained in higher states of love of Krishna. So this verse then says, first of all, he establishes who is the supreme absolute truth. And the supreme absolute truth is higher than the conception of God. We've already discussed that in the introduction. There are many gods in this world. God, the Sanskrit word for God is Ishwara. So there are many Ishwaras. It depends on what frame of reference you're talking about. Like Bill Gates is Ishwara in Microsoft, and Bezos is Ishwara in Amazon, and Larry Ellison is Ishwara in Oracle, right? But then there's Trump, he's Ishwara in the United States, and then there's this one and that one, and you go up all the way to Indra, Chandra, Varuna, and Devi, and so forth. They're all Ishwaras. But the supreme Ishwara, or Paratattva, or Parameshwara, is Lord Krishna. Now, most people say, well, you know, this all sounds nice. Maybe it's all fairy tales. I don't know if it's true or not. Well, that's why Vyasadeva took so much time and trouble to write the Srimad Bhagavatam, because there's incontrovertible, unparalleled explanation of what constitutes God, the supreme absolute truth. There are many gods, but there's one supreme absolute truth from which everything else emanates. And that's what you learn by reading the Bhagavatam. If you want to know what is the origin of all emanations, or all life and all universes and the spiritual world and the material world, you must read Srimad Bhagavatam, because there's no other description. It's not in the Bible, it's not in the Quran, it's not in the Buddhist writings, it's not in the Granth Sahib, it's not in Chinese philosophy, it's not in American Indian, animism. You have to read Srimad Bhagavatam, because no other scripture in the world has such detailed explanation of who is God, what's going on in the spiritual world, and how to attain our original home back to Godhead in this lifetime. There's no other explanation in the other scriptures. The other scriptures, like the Bible, like the Quran, like the Torah, have general information and pointing toward the goal, but no specifics about the spiritual world. Absolutely zero. You know, even when Muhammad went to Jannat, he spoke with the Archangel Gabriel. He didn't see God. He just saw some light and heard a voice. See, that's about it. There's nothing else. In the Bible, there's even less than that, right? So, what is the Srimad Bhagavatam? It is the supreme literature in the whole universe. And that is explained in the purport. So then, let's finish reading this. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water. So what does that mean? Let's say you're driving down to California, and you're in the countryside in Southern California on an asphalt road, or you could be in Washington State in the summertime on an asphalt road, and in the distance on the road you see water. Is there water? No. but because of refraction and heat and the way that light can bend and so forth, it looks like water. But when you approach it, there's no water. There's just asphalt road. And sometimes you look into the desert and you see water. Is there water in the desert? No. And if you get fooled, like sometimes animals get fooled and they walk toward the water in the desert and you find their bones, right? They die. And sometimes you see land on water. Sometimes you're on a boat, on a cruise, and you look in the distance, you think you see land, but there's no land. So these are all illusory tricks that the eyes and the way that heat and light are refracted play on us. So it says here that he imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. Now, this is a hard thing to understand. But if you ask an older person, they'll explain the truth to you. That they have many memories of when they were younger, and they had their mom and pop and uncles and aunties. They're all dead. All of them are dead, right? And all they have is memories. And even those memories are fading, right? And they might have some old pictures, but they're also fading, you see. And eventually there's nothing. You're left with nothing. I asked my mom once, you want me to take you back to the old country? You can see where you were born. She said, no, I don't want to go. I said, why not? I said, it'll just bring back too many bad memories, and there's no one there anyway. That's the truth. There's no one there. They all died, you see. And then she also eventually died, you know. And what is there left? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So actually, that's the problem with material nature. It goes through two states. Sometimes it's manifest, sometimes it's not manifest. So therefore, it's illusory. We eventually lose everything, right? And then eventually the material nature disappears. That's even more like bewildering. Just like sometimes you have money in the bank, sometimes you don't. I hope that doesn't happen to you, but it happens to a lot of people in America, believe me. So, you know, this is the illusory nature of matter, and scientists don't understand matter. Actually, matter is spiritual because it's coming from Krishna, but it goes through these states of manifest and unmanifest, and it bewilders people. So, therefore, it says, I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. So this is, if you learn this one verse, then you know now who God is. And then there's many other verses that support this verse, like 10th chapter, 8th verse of Bhagavad Gita, and then the first verse of the Brahma Samhita, and so forth. We can go down to a long, long list of other verses that support this verse. So once you learn the definition of God and God's qualities, then you're in a good position to be able to remain steady in your devotion for the rest of your life, and also not be fooled by so-called man gods and other so-called representations of God. And also, you'll be able to convince other people because you have scientific knowledge of who God is. And Prabhupada once said, we don't have to prove Krishna is God. Let them prove he's not God. If you explain correctly who Krishna is, let them prove he's not God. You see, because this explanation of who Krishna is scientific. No one could even imagine this. They have to, and if they tried to imagine if there is a God, who he is and what qualities they would have to come to this explanation. So now, instead of dwelling too much on this, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur lectured 3 months on this one verse. That's how profound it is, right? But I've made a little summary of the points in the purport. So Vyasadeva asserts that Krishna, also, let's see, we have a PowerPoint presentation? Okay, let's put it on. You should put it on right away. I shouldn't have to ask you. So, in the first chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, we're talking about questions by the sages. So there is a prelude, and the prelude gives the subject, and glories and the goal of Srimad Bhagavatam, and so forth. And then 6 questions. So it begins, of course, avec Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva. This explains what the whole Bhagavatam is about, that one line. Right? And now, when we define, so this first verse defines the absolute truth. So I don't know if you can see this clearly or not. You want to dim the lights so they can see it better. So, don't close everything. Leave this one. So, defining the absolute truth, number 1, there's a primeval cause. And notice it's not E-V-I-L, it's E-V-A-L, primeval. It's not that it's evil, right? And Vyasadeva asserts that Krishna, also known as Vasudeva, is the original personality of Godhead. And at this point, he gives other references where great acharyas and great philosophers have said the same thing. There's Jiva Goswami in the Krishna Sandarbha establishes Krishna as a Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brahma in the Brahma Samhita establishes Krishna as Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Samaveda Upanishad says Shri Krishna is the divine son of Devaki and Krishna. Then every one of the Mahajans claim that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. There's Bhisma, and there's Prahlad Maharaj, and there's Yamaraj, and also there's a whole list of them. They all say that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All the Alvars have said that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the different Vaishnava Sampradayas, the Rudra Sampradaya, the Kumar Sampradaya, the Sri Sampradaya, and of course Brahma Gaudiya Sampradaya. They all say that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. It's not just Prabhupada says it, or Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said it. There's a huge list of great authorities that claim that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God, and they give the proof. Okay, and then Arjuna himself, who was personal associate of Krishna, he also says, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam Bhava. He also says Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Krishna himself says that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Narada, and Vyasa, and so forth. So this first verse, Vyasadeva is saying that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I don't know how much more proof we need, but Prabhupada goes through the list. And now, in order to reach the substance from which everything else is made, you have to get to the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The substance is Krishna, right? Just like we said, let's say clay is a substance, and all the potteries and whatever you make from the clay are the categories. So the substance of all of the absolute truth is Krishna. And from Krishna, everything else emanates, all the categories. And all of that means all of Krishna's expansions. What are those expansions? Well, you have Balaram, then you have the first Chaturvyuha, then you have Narayana forms from the first Chaturvyuha, and then you have the second Chaturvyuha and all the Vishnu forms, and then you come down to Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, and then you have all incarnations of the Lord coming through Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, and then you also have the material nature, and right there we're into billions of expansions already, right? Already billions of expansions. Then you have all the jiva souls in the material nature. So if you look at it like that, Parasya Shakti Vividaiva Shriyate, Krishna has infinite energies, internal, marginal, and external, and you cannot estimate them. It's bewildering. See, so but if you understand Krishna, then you'll understand everything else, see? Because he's the origin of everything. So Krishna is the origin of all creations, maintenance, and destruction of the universes, and his supreme will is behind all cosmic activities. And there's an example. Modern scientists, they're able to make a Sputnik, or a satellite, and put it into space and control it remotely from hundreds or thousands of miles away, right? But let's take a look. Who made the big satellites, the Earth, Mars, the Sun, and all the planets and stars, and is keeping them perfectly synced and synchronated in orbits, right? I mean, the little Sputniks, they're up there some years, and then all of a sudden they crash, right? But the big Sputniks, they never crash, right? And who did that? So the little intelligence of the scientists can put up a Sputnik. Now we can understand there's a much bigger intelligence that created and is maintaining the gigantic Sputniks in the universe. You see, Prabhupada gives that example in the introduction, in this first purport. And therefore, Krishna has the supreme intelligence and inconceivable energies of different varieties that cannot be seen with our imperfect senses. He thinks nature creates, the scientists think that nature creates itself without the help of superior intelligence. How do we know that? Just read the Big Bang Theory. They say that everything starts from a point, and point is something that has no dimension, but they say it has infinite density and temperature. So that right there is an oxymoron, right? And that it somehow or other explodes, and all of a sudden it expands into a gigantic universe from a point. That means from nothing, basically. So it's a phony explanation. You have to go and actually read the science books that your kids are studying at school. This is the explanation they give. You didn't know that, but it's a nonsense explanation. It has no validity at all. And so they say that nature creates itself without the help of superior intelligence. Yes, it all happened like that. And then because of gravity, because of this or that, it developed into New York City and the Grand Canyon and microscopic creatures and blah, blah, blah. You think that's an explanation? It's nonsense, right? So the law of nature is everything emanates from Krishna, everything is maintained by Krishna, the supreme intelligent person, and everything enters into him. This is explained in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. We won't go through all that now, but so the scientists think the ultimate source of the planetary system is the sun, but they cannot explain the source of the sun. Brahma may be compared to the sun. He receives the knowledge of Krishna to create the material world. Then Krishna has two defining qualities that nobody else has. None of the devas, nobody else has. That is Abhigya Swarat. This distinguishes the Supreme Lord from all others. No one is fully cognizant. Abhigya means he's fully cognizant. And no one is fully independent. Krishna is fully independent. He doesn't depend on anyone else. And neither the impersonalists, Einstein, and scientists, demons like Ravana or Hiranyakashipu, or modern atheists, are Avijja Swarat. They all, all the demons were defeated, Ravana and Hiranyakashipu and so forth, by Krishna. Einstein received his intelligence from Krishna. He didn't make it himself, and the scientists. And the impersonalists, they want to merge into the Brahma Jyoti. They engage in great austerities and so forth, and they eventually fall down because they don't have any shelter or ashraya. They don't go to a Vaikuntha planet that's also in the Brahma Jyoti, and they fall down. So whenever men neglect the authority of the Lord, nature and her laws are there to penalize them. Now, this is a big point, and we should think about it. That means that when we avoid the authority of Krishna, the authority of Krishna is the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. When we avoid that, then nature and her laws are there to penalize us. It's the law of karma. And we're penalized in several ways. We're either penalized by being promoted to higher states of existence in like the Deva Lokas, or we're penalized by staying in the middle, in the earth, middle planets, or penalized by going to the lower planets. All three are penal. Penal means subject to law. Why? Because in all three places, whether it's Devalokas or the middle planets or the hellish planets, we're subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. Why? Because we refuse to recognize the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then God is greater, or Krishna is greater than a watchmaker. A watchmaker can make a great Rolex watch or a Swiss watch, but the watch cannot reproduce itself. Krishna makes male and female, and they can reproduce themselves. So the day that AI finds a way to make a robot that can reproduce itself, then they can talk. Then they have something to talk about. But the robots will never be completely independent of human beings, no matter what they say. So Krishna is asamudra. No one is equal or greater than him. He's also param satyam. And we've already saw this term in the introduction. Param satyam means the supreme truth, which means there's no one equal or greater than him. Without surrender to the Supreme Lord, one must be bewildered. Daivihi esa gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya. Krishna is parama, the truth, because all other truths are relative to him. He is omniscient, and there's no illusion for him. So Krishna, see, the scientists say that everything is relative. That is not exactly true. What they mean is there's no absolute truth. And there's only the relativity in this world. And Einstein gave a long description of relativity, which was already in the Bhagavatam way before Einstein. In any case, relative means one thing depends on another thing. Now, if you say there's no absolute truth, then one relative thing is dependent on another relative thing, and then another relative thing, and you have like an infinite regress of relative things in the material world. So that means there's no truth. And this is what they teach your kids, by the way, in school. There's no absolute truth. There's no God. There's no spiritual world that's eternal. Everything is relative. That means that once you accept that false theory, you become a sense gratifier. Because they convince you to be a sense gratifier with two false conceptions. One, everything is relative. Two, after death, there's nothing. Once you accept those 2 points, then you become a sense gratifier. Because you think, well, this is the only life, and I got to squeeze out as much sense gratification as I can, because this is it. After death, there's nothing. Right? Many people today, by the way, atheism that's based on these two concepts has become the major religion in America today. 23% of the American population is atheistic today. It used to be like 5 or 10%. Now it's going up to 23. That's more than the Protestants, more than the Catholics, more than the Muslims, more than the Jews, and so forth. It is the prominent religion in America today, and it's increasing. Why? Because of the public school education. Why? Because of this modern atheistic philosophies that have been going around for the last 300-400 years from Europe. Europe is the cornerstone of atheism, especially England, and they have infested the education system everywhere, in India also. Okay, so by the way, so Krishna is omniscient, and there's no illusion for him, but everybody else, including the devas, are in illusion, right? Sometimes Brahma thought, who is this Krishna? And Indra thought, what is this Krishna? I'll show him. So even Brahma and even Shiva said, he got freaked out by Mohini Murti. So there's only one person who's never in illusion. That's Krishna. Everybody else is affected a little bit or a lot by illusion. Well, there's no absolute truth. That means there's no God, there's no spiritual world, there's nothing that's eternal. Everything is relative. One imperfect relative thing is relative to another imperfect relative thing. Therefore, there's no absolute truth. There's nothing perfect. Okay? So therefore, you're not responsible. You can do it. And then you should never depend on somebody else, because everything is relative. So whatever you think, that's what the truth is. Right. So the whole creation is moving. Now, this is all these points are in the purport to this first verse. The whole material creation is moving under the principle of sex life. In modern civilization, sex life is the focal point for all activities. Wherever one turns his or her face, he sees sex life predominant. Therefore, sex life is not unreal. Its reality is experienced in the spiritual world. The material sex life is but a perverted reflection of the original fact. The original fact is in the absolute truth, and thus the absolute truth cannot be impersonal. It is not possible to be impersonal and contain pure sex life. Consequently, the impersonalists, Consequently, impersonalist philosophers have given indirect impetus to the abominable mundane sex life, because they have overstressed the impersonality of the ultimate truth. So now it's another factor. It's the impersonalists, because they say that the God state is not personal. It's impersonal. So therefore, while you're a person in this temporary body, you should squeeze out as much illicit activities or sense gratification, and the epitome of it is illicit sex, as you can. And that's what's happening. You read the newspapers, anywhere you look, whether it's in the Bollywood movies or the Hollywood movies or this movie or that movie or this novel or that novel, it's all about the same thing. And it's in the news every day, so-and-so got caught cheating and doing this and doing that, and all over the place. The whole place is contaminated with this. So, therefore, it says here, consequently, men without information of the actual spiritual form of sex have accepted perverted material sex life as the all-in-all. There is a distinction between sex life in the diseased material condition and spiritual sex life. This Srimad Bhagavatam will gradually elevate the unbiased reader to the highest perfectional stage of transcendence. It will enable him or her to transcend the three modes of material nature: fruitive actions, speculative philosophy, and worship of functional deities as inculcated in the Vedic verses. So, what is a functional deity? You go to Shiva to get a good husband. You go to Durga, that's Durga, to get a good wife. Right? You go to Indra to get rain for the fields. Right? And you go to this one to get that, and this. So those are called functional deities. They give you a certain function that you want. Right? That's not the purpose of deity, but that's the way they're being treated, and that's the way they're being presented, unfortunately, by the brahmanas, the phony brahmanas. Okay. So that's sort of like the summary of the purport. Some of the main points. There are probably other main points, but these are the main ones that I saw. But there is one very important point, and I just want to discuss that. That is, in this first purport, it explains that people are penalized for refusing to accept the authority of God. So this is a main point that we should understand. Srila Prabhupada explains that suffering is necessary. What does that mean? Well, when we suffer, we begin to question life. And we sometimes begin to ask questions. What is the purpose of life? And in this purport, Prabhupada explained that when a child is misbehaving, the father sometimes will entrust the child to a strict disciplinarian. And under the, let's say, regime of the strict disciplinarian, the child is forced to do things in order to become disciplined. Right? Now, the father doesn't like to do that, but it's necessary, otherwise the child will not be corrected. So, therefore, Durga has the thankless task of causing suffering to living entities. But that suffering is remedial. It's necessary for the living entity to come to their senses that I must be making some mistake somewhere. Just like somebody came and asked me a question, a health question. And after discussing a long time, I realized that the problem this person had was that they, usually it's related to the diet and lifestyle. And I won't go into all the details, but with a little bit of adjustment of the lifestyle and the diet, this person saw that their problem went away. You see. So they would not have asked the question because they had gone already to many doctors and they did all kinds of, MRIs and this thing and that thing, and nothing worked. Right? But by making that little adjustment of lifestyle and diet, the person got better. Now, why is it? Because if we do not have a proper lifestyle, that is the devotee lifestyle. That is, you don't eat meat, fish, eggs, so forth. No intoxication, including coffee and tea, and no, illicit activities outside of marriage, and no, and so forth. And then taking rest early, waking up early, bathing at least twice a day, putting on clean clothes, and hearing Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita morning and evening, and so forth, engaging the body in devotional service, you become healthy by regulation. Regulation makes you healthy. Irregulation makes you sick. Going to sleep late, waking up late, overeating, eating junk food, eating late at night, all these things will make you sick over time. Not right away, but over time, whether it's a little child or an adult. So then one begins to suffer. That suffering is necessary for some people to wake up. But people are so adamant to have sense gratification that although they're suffering, they still won't give it up. And they won't ask any questions. That's how much an illusion people have become through sense gratification. The little bit of pleasure one has through sense gratification keeps a person suffering, keeps them going on getting beat up over and over again by Maya, right? And then birth after birth also, you see. But someone who's intelligent, they say, look, I don't want to suffer like this. There must be some solution to it. It's not aspirin, it's not this thing or that thing. There's got to be some solution. The solution is Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. That's the solution. Right? And therefore, the Maya is forcing people to suffer and be in illusion and then make mistakes and suffer so that they'll wake up. It's a message from God to us. Right? But as long as we are attached to sense gratification, we refuse to wake up. You can wake up a person who's sleeping. You cannot wake up a person pretending to sleep. See? So we refuse to wake up because of that attachment to sense gratification. And unless we give it up, we will never become a genuine devotee. But you cannot give it up artificially. You give it up by regularly coming to class, regularly hearing and chanting, regularly engaging in devotional service. And to do that, you have to be regulated. You have to go to sleep early. You have to wake up early. You have to take at least 2 baths. Best is 3 baths a day. You always clean clothes, cut your fingernails, all these things. But the main thing is hearing and chanting. That's the main thing. That's the only way you can actually change a person. You don't change a person by showing them a movie or a PowerPoint. That's not the way to change a person's life. And most people including our devotees, do not really like to hear on a regular basis. They like to hear when some guest speaker comes, but they don't like to hear every day, morning and evening. See, that's a big mistake. That means you will not make any tangible spiritual progress until you adjust to that regular hearing and chanting. And this is what Prabhupada insisted on. If you want to be a devotee, especially if you're initiated, you have to do this. Otherwise, you will not make any tangible spiritual progress. It'll be sporadic spiritual progress. It's like the theory of evolution, because they don't have all the fossils. They say, well, evolution takes place sporadically in short periods of time. That's why you don't see all the fossils, Well, your spiritual life will be sporadic like that. Little spurts. But then long periods of not actually hearing and chanting will annihilate the little bit of advancement you made in little spurts. Okay, so that's explained in this first purport. So now the second verse. Dharma projita kaitava. So completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. We'll be finished in about 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the most. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. This is an extremely important verse. So let's just follow. Let's go back to the first verse again. You have 7 points made in the first verse. That is, it explains the primeval cause, which is cognizant, independent, an enlightener, a bewilderer, and factual basis and eternal abode. So that is explained in the following way. When it says Janmadasya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadasya Yata Nivayadi Charteso Vigya Swarat, this establishes the primeval cause, Krishna. And then he's fully cognizant, that is avigya. And then he's fully independent. So now we've covered 3 points of the verse, right? Now I'm giving the words. Then, Tene Brahma Hirda Ya Adhikavaye. He's the enlightener. He enlightened Lord Brahma how to create the creation. And then, Muyanti Yat Surayaha Tejo Vari Mridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Amrisha. He's the bewilderer. He makes it appear as if there's water on land and land on water, you see. And then, Damna Srena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam. He is the is a factual basis of everything. And then Satyam Param Dhimahi, I meditate upon him. It's the eternal abode. So here we see the word Dhimahi. That means that this mantra, first mantra, is a Gayatri mantra. There are different Gayatri mantras. This is one of them. Right? This is something you could meditate on the rest of your life and say it every day. Meditate on it. Okay? Now we go to the second verse, and let's take a look at that. So the second verse, you have 7 points again, and we'll go over them very quickly. So, Dharma Projita Kaitavotra. It rejects cheating religion. So this verse rejects cheating religion. Cheating religion means Ayur Arogya Aishwarya. That's the purpose of life. You follow religion for long life, health, and prosperity. Right? That's cheating religion. And then next, Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam. It propounds the highest truth understandable by the non-envious. So a person who's envious means that somebody else has something you don't have, and you become jealous of them, and you want to get the same thing. So you get the same thing, but that's not enough. They have to lose it also. That means you're envious. Just like Ravana, he had so many wives. He had thousands of wives, and they were all beautiful. But when he heard about Sita, and in his screwed up mind, he thought, oh, Rama is powerful because he has a beautiful wife. That's the way demons think, see. So all the demons, you see all the movie stars, they all have beautiful wives, right? Because they're demons. And so that doesn't mean you're more advanced if your wife is ugly. but anyway, I won't continue on that line. Anyway, so the Ravana, he thought, if I can steal his wife, then he'll be a wimp. And he thought he succeeded, because Rama was crying. He was going through the forest. He didn't have an army. He didn't have a treasury. And he was saying, Sita, Sita, where are you? You know, and Ravana thought, oh, you see how smart I am, you know. I knew his weakness, you know. He was too attached to his wife, you know. It took her away from him. Now he's nothing. Of course, he was wrong. Dead wrong. So he was envious. And Sisupala was envious. And so forth. All these people are envious. Envy is a normal thing in the material world because there's competition in the material world. Everyone's competing for sense gratification, and they're competing in jobs, but it's in order to make more money and have better sense gratification. So, and then countries are competing with each other, like China and America are competing with each other. Why? For sense gratification. All wars are fought for sense gratification. The Israelis want to have a certain Israeli sense gratification, and the Palestinians want to have a certain Palestinian sense gratification. And the Muslim Kashmiris want to have sense gratification a certain way, and the Indian Hindus want to have sense gratification another way in Kashmir, see? So all the wars and all competition is based on sense gratification. And sense gratification makes people envious. Okay, and then Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu Shivadam distinguishes reality from illusion for the welfare of all. Now this is real philosophy, when you can tell the difference or distinguish reality from illusion for the welfare of all. Usually the Mayavadis distinguish reality from illusion, but they leave out for the welfare of all. The devotees don't leave out for the welfare of all, because they're not envious. They're not trying to compete with anyone. They're trying to serve everyone by giving Krishna prema. And then Tapa Chayon Mulanam uproots the threefold miseries. And Srimad Bhagavatam Mahamuni Krite Kimva Parir Ishvara, it's sufficient for self-realization. And Sadyo Hridya Avarudyate Tra Kritibihi Susrubis Susrusubis Tat Kshanat establishes the Lord in the heart. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam 112. And these are the 7 themes. So, completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. We should not think that this is fairy tale. This is truth. You don't have to study science. You don't have to study biology. You don't have to study anything. All those subjects are dealt with in the Bhagavatam. Economics, sociology, anthropology, all the sciences, everything is in the Bhagavatam. But you have to read it to understand. And if you don't read it, and you read other books, then you might have to wait many lifetimes to get another chance. So Prabhupada says in the purport, religion includes 4 primary subjects: pious activities, economic development, satisfaction of senses, and finally liberation from material bondage. Irreligious life is a barbarous condition. Indeed, human life begins when religion begins. Eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating are the 4 principles of animal life. These are common both to animals and to human beings. But religion is the extra function of the human being. Without religion, human life is no better than animal life. Therefore, in human societies, there is some form of religion which aims at self-realization, which makes reference to man's eternal relationship with God. So, now we see, why is atheism on the rise in America and around the world, and India also? Because of the education system that teaches them to be atheists. And because of that, they're no longer human beings, they're animals. They don't have any moral compass anymore, because relativity, and at the end of life, you die, there's nothing. There's no more existence after that. And, or the absolute truth is merging into Brahman, where there's no personality, there's no relationships. So that all those things encourage sense gratification in this lifetime. See, it encourages one to be a sense gratifier. Therefore, people say, I work hard and I play hard, right? So play hard means I engage in as much sense gratification, my leisure, as I can, you know. And I work hard because I need money to have more sense gratification. This is the ethos, E-T-H-O-S. This is the way people structure their vision of the world and their philosophy of the world, you know, of life. In the lower stages of human civilization, there's always competition to lord it over the material nature, or in other words, there is a continuous rivalry to satisfy the senses. Driven by such consciousness, man turns to religion. He thus performs pious activities or religious functions in order to gain something material. But if such material gains are obtainable in other ways, then so-called religion is neglected. This is the situation in modern civilization. So therefore today, people are not studying Bhagavatam so much in India, but they are studying Microsoft certification, JavaScript, and all these things. Why? Because they want to compete, and they want to have economic gains to have better sense gratification. So man is thriving economically. So at present, he's not very interested in religion. Yeah, the more material prosperity, the less religious people become. You see, look at Ravana. He had thousands of wives. Every night they would drink, and have and dance, and they would and then sleep in a drunken stupor, and then wake up and repeat it again the next day. Right? That's what's called happiness in the material world. Actually, it's hopelessness. Hare Krishna, Shri Radha Nilmadhava Ki Jai. And Prabhupada says that churches, mosques, or temples are now practically vacant. Men are more interested in factories, shops, and cinemas. Yeah, go to Bellevue Mall. The place is crowded. Go to, you know, the cinema, the cinema in Bellevue. They have, like, you know, 10 different rooms, different films at one time, you know, right? Go to the casino. Go to the football or baseball game or basketball game. They're crowded. You know, people are enthusiastic. They're screaming. Go to the racetrack, right? Go to Las Vegas. But go to the temple, no, I'm not interested. Yes, this practically proves that religion is performed for some economic gains. Economic gains are needed for sense gratification. Often when one is baffled in the pursuit of sense gratification, he takes to salvation and tries to become one with the Supreme Lord. In other words, he becomes a Mayavadi to become God. Right? Consequently, all these states are simply different types of sense gratification. Meditation, yoga, it's all based on sense gratification, improving your body or being liberated and becoming God. See? In the Vedas, the above-mentioned 4 activities are prescribed in a regulative way so that there will not be any undue competition for sense gratification. This competition for sense gratification, this is what kids learn just by observing. So the girl that has, the higher, right? So then the other kids, they start by, wearing these long stockings, but a miniskirt with it, And then eventually the long stockings go away, it's just a miniskirt. And now the question is the competition for how mini the miniskirt becomes, you see. So Prabhupada says when a girl dresses like that, she's trying to show off her, let's say, offerings, right? And I remember when Prabhupada came to France, our temple was in a very prominent place, right near the Champs-Élysées and the Arc de Triomphe. And every night when you would drive to the temple, there were all these women on the street, and they were wearing mink coats. And as you would drive by, they would open up the mink coat, and they're naked. They were basically, advertising themselves for sense gratification. And Prabhupada, he saw this. He said, "Just look at this." He said, "This is what men want. They want to see a woman standing on a corner late at night, naked. Otherwise, she wouldn't be there. It's because men want to see that. Therefore, that woman is there, exposing herself like that. You see, this is what's happening in this culture today, and you'll see more and more. All these movie stars and rock artists and everything, they're putting on less and less clothing when they perform. They have bikinis now that are tape. It's not clothing, it's a tape, and you can see almost the whole body. So this type of culture is the result of the educational system, and all the enticements that kids are bombarded with on the internet and television and movies and so forth. And not only kids, everybody is bombarded with this. So unless there's regulated life, one becomes addicted to these things just by seeing them all over the place. Right. In the material world, there's keen competition between animal and animal, man and man, community and community, nation and nation. Now, those kids who cannot compete for sense gratification, they turn to dark ways of living, dressing in black, getting tattoos, mutilating their body, and worshiping death. Right? So that's because they stop trying to compete with everybody else, so they go the other way, and they develop this cult of death. In the material world, there's keen competition. But the devotees of the Lord rise above such competitions. They do not compete with the materialists because they are on the path back to Godhead, where life is eternal and blissful. Such transcendentalists are non-envious and pure in heart. In the material world, everyone is envious of everyone else, and therefore there is competition. But the transcendental devotees of the Lord are not only free from material envy, but are well-wishers to everyone, and they strive to establish a competitionless society with God in the center. The contemporary socialist conception of competitionless society is artificial, because in the socialist state there's competition for the post of dictator. So this was the problem in Russia. They tried to create a competitionless and classless society, and it failed. And today the socialists in America are trying to do the same thing, and it will also fail. And the capitalists are also failing because there's moral decrepitude. What will succeed if there is genuine Krishna consciousness? That would solve the problems of society. But we have to be convinced of this, and we have to demonstrate it. You cannot convince another person unless you demonstrate it by your own life and activities. Okay, so from the point of view of the Vedas, or from the point of view of common human activities, sense gratification is the basis of material life. There are three paths mentioned in the Vedas. One involves fruitive activities to gain promotion to better planets. Another involves worshiping different demigods for promotion to the planets of the demigods. And another involves realizing the absolute truth and his impersonal feature becoming one with him. The impersonal aspect of the absolute truth is not the highest. Above the impersonal feature is the Paramatma feature, and above this is the personal feature of the absolute truth, or Bhagavan. Srimad Bhagavatam gives information about the absolute truth in his personal feature. It is higher than impersonalist literatures and higher than the Jnana-kanda division of the Vedas. It is even higher than the Karma-kanda division and even higher than the Upasana-kanda division, because it recommends the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Upasana-kanda is worshiping demigods, and Krishna consciousness is worshiping Krishna. Lord, in the Karma-kanda, there is competition to reach heavenly planets for better sense gratification. And there is similar competition in Jnana-kanda, that's for merging into the impersonal nature, and Upasana-kanda, worship of demigods. The Srimad Bhagavatam is superior to all these because it aims at the supreme truth, which is the substance or the root of all categories. Again, this substance and category is a main theme that's running through this beginning of the Bhagavatam. The substance is the absolute truth, the Supreme Lord, and all emanations are relative forms of energy. So if you try to find the truth in the relative forms, you'll get bewildered, unless you're trained to see the truth in the relative forms. If you look in a haphazard way, you'll get bewildered. Nothing is apart from the substance, but at the same time, the energies are different from the substance. This conception is not contradictory. Srimad Bhagavatam explicitly promulgates this simultaneously one and different philosophy of the Vedanta Sutra, which begins with Janmadasya Sutra. This knowledge that the energy of the Lord is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord is an answer to the mental speculator's attempt to establish the energy as the absolute. This is a big point. It is very philosophical. The atheists and the impersonalists, they say everything is energy. Or another way they say is everything is chemicals. Somebody told me that last week in a food truck. Everything's chemicals, right? But this is all nonsense. See, everything is one and different. The chemicals, the energy, it's all coming from Krishna, who's a person. But he is independent, and it looks like the energies are independent, but they're not. See, just like, yes. Yeah. No, well, yes, they're praying to the functional deities, right? But Upasana Kanda, you're actually worshiping the deity in a very specific way. They're related, but there's some slight difference, because no one believes in a deity. They're all materialists, right? It's just a functional deity. Like, that's why they have Visarjan, right? The deity comes and goes. It's like a light bulb, you turn it on, you turn it off. It's not really serious worship. So they'll bring a pot, and you put a coconut on top, and then you put some water and money in it, and that's supposed to be the representative of the deity, right? To do the puja. It's just a functional thing. But then when you worship the deity every day, like they do, like Tiruchendur or the Shiva temples, then that's upasana. It's done in a regulated way. But it's still not the summum bonum, not the paratattva. So, knowledge of the energy of the Lord is simultaneously one and different from the Lord. Is an answer to the mental speculator's attempt to establish the energy as the absolute. When this knowledge is factually understood, one sees the conceptions of monism and dualism to be imperfect. So you can understand material oneness, and you can understand material duality, but you cannot understand oneness and inconceivable duality. So that is hard to understand unless you hear it explained by Vaishnava acharyas. Development of this transcendental consciousness, grounded in the conception of simultaneously one and different, leads one immediately to the stage of freedom from the threefold miseries. The threefold miseries are those miseries which arise from the mind and body, those miseries inflicted by other living entities, and those miseries arising from natural catastrophes over which one has no control. Srimad Bhagavatam begins with the surrender of the devotees unto the absolute person. The devotee is fully aware that he is one with the absolute, and at the same time in the eternal position of servant to the Absolute. In the material conception, one falsely thinks himself the lord of all he surveys, and therefore he is always troubled by the threefold miseries. But as soon as one comes to know his real position as transcendental servant, he at once becomes free from all miseries. Now this is important. This is called the state of neutrality, or udasina vad asina. Guna eva vichalyate. When you become neutral. Neutral means because you're not attracted to anything or repulsed by anything. That is neutrality. And the neutrality is based on your service to Krishna. Therefore, you can do something that you would never do normally. And you cannot do something that you always wanted to do before. Because you have this neutrality. You're not attracted, you're not repulsed. You see everything as belonging to Krishna, and you will only engage with that thing according to Krishna's desire. So Arjuna, he did not want to fight. Right? He did not want to fight against his own family members. But once he understood Krishna consciousness, without attachment to the result, he fought. While you have attachment, sometimes you will not do the right thing because of attachment. But if you don't have attachment or repulsion, then you can do the right thing all the time. Because the right thing is to only act according to Krishna's instructions. And those instructions also come through the bona fide guru. As long as the living entity is trying to master the material nature, there is no possibility of his becoming servant of the Supreme. Service to the Lord is rendered in pure consciousness of one's spiritual identity. By service, one is immediately freed from material encumbrance. So what is that spiritual identity? That is, I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. If we don't come to that conclusion, we will not function properly in devotional service. Srimad Bhagavatam is a personal commentation on the Vedanta Sutra by Sri Vyasadeva. It is written in the maturity of his spiritual life through the mercy of Narada. Vedavyasa is the authorized incarnation of Narayana, the personality of Godhead. Therefore, there's no question as to his authority. He's the author of all other Vedic literatures, yet he recommends the study of Srimad Bhagavatam above all others. In other Puranas, there are different methods set forth by which one can worship the demigods. But in the Bhagavatam, only the Supreme Lord is mentioned. The Supreme Lord is the total body, and the demigods are different parts of that body. Consequently, by worshiping the Supreme Lord, one does not need to worship the demigods, because they're satisfied by your worship of the Lord. The Supreme Lord becomes fixed in the heart of the devotee immediately. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended the Srimad Bhagavatam as the spotless Purana and distinguishes it from all other Puranas. The proper method for receiving this transcendental message is to hear it submissively. Submissively means wake up early, take that bath, come to Mangalarati, and then after Mangalarati and so forth, we have Bhagavatam. Is that right? He's coming every day. Right? He didn't come before. Now he's coming every day. Right? You all should come. And if you organize your life like that, you'll see that everything becomes very, very nice. Very, very nice. Less fortunate persons are not at all interested in hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. Oh, I'm sorry. The proper method for receiving this transcendental message is to hear it submissively. A challenging attitude cannot help one realize this transcendental message. One particular word is used herein for proper guidance. The word is shusrusu. One must be anxious to hear this transcendental message. The desire to sincerely hear is the first qualification. Less fortunate persons are not at all interested in hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. The process is simple, but the application is difficult. Unfortunate people find enough time to hear idle social and political conversations, but when invited to attend a meeting of devotees to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, they suddenly become reluctant. Sometimes professional readers of the Bhagavatam immediately plunge into the confidential topics of the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, which they seemingly interpret as sex literature, meaning mundane sex. Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to be heard from the beginning. Those who are fit to assimilate this work are mentioned in the sloka. One becomes qualified to hear Srimad Bhagavatam after many pious deeds. The intelligent person with thoughtful discretion can be assured by the great sage Vyasadeva that he can realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Notice it didn't say reading, it said by hearing. Without undergoing the different stages of realization set forth in the Vedas, one can be lifted immediately to the position of Paramahansa simply by agreeing to receive this message. So you don't have to, study Sanskrit and study meter and study this and study that. No, you simply have to hear Srimad Bhagavatam and you'll get all knowledge. Nigama Kalpatarosha, and that's the last one, last verse for this lesson. And then we'll hear some homework, and then we give homework for next week. So Nigama Kalpataror Galitam Phalam Sukha Mukad Amrita Drava Samyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasam Alayam Muhur Ahurasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. So this has two major points, that the Srimad Bhagavatam is a mature fruit of Vedic literature. It became tastier, number two, by the touch of the lips of Sukadeva Goswami. So this is very important, because Sukadeva Goswami made Bhagavatam interesting for everyone. Everyone will find something fascinating in the Bhagavatam. Like you can read about what happens in hell. People are interested in that. And you can find out what happens in the spiritual world. And you can find out how to become free of the modes of material nature, being a liberated person in this world. There's so much information and knowledge in the Bhagavatam. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. Mature fruit of Vedic literature. That's number one. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami, therefore this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. So it became tastier because of the touch of the lips of Sukadeva Goswami. So this Bhagavatam surpasses all other Vedic scriptures due to its transcendental qualities. It's the ripened fruit of Vedic literatures. It's the cream of all Vedic knowledge. And one must be patient and submissively hear. And this is definitely essential. And with great respect and attention, one should receive the message and lessons imparted by Srimad Bhagavatam. Mundane necessities as well as spiritual realization will all be dealt with in the Bhagavatam. And the Vedas contain regulative principles of knowledge covering social, political, religious, economic, military, medicinal, chemical, physical, and metaphysical subject matter, and all that may be necessary to keep the body and soul together. In other words, you don't need any other book. Throw out all the other books. You don't need them. I have a huge library. I threw it out. All I have now is Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Nectar, Devotion, Ishopanishad. That's it. That's enough for the rest of my life and maybe many more lifetimes. So you don't need any other book. They're all nonsense. So then, the highest spiritual knowledge is knowledge that the personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all spiritual tastes or rasas. And therefore, Brahma, down to the insignificant ant, desire to relish some sort of taste derived from sense perceptions. These sensual pleasures are technically called rasas. Such rasas are of different varieties. In the revealed scriptures, the following 12 varieties of rasas are enumerated. Rodra, anger. Adbhuta, wonder. Shingara, conjugal love. Hasya, comedy. Vira, chivalry. Daya, mercy. Dasya, servitorship. Sakya, fraternity. Bhayanaka, horror. Bibhatsa, shock. Shanta, neutrality. Vatsalya, parenthood. Now you're going to hear something really interesting. Really interesting. That's why psychology is one of the main topics in this Bhagavatam. The sum total of all these rasas is called affection or love. Primarily such signs of love are manifested in adoration, service, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. And when these 5 are absent, love is present indirectly in anger, wonder, comedy, chivalry, fear, shock, and so on. So now you know why you become angry in your marriage. It's because the 5 primary ways of rasa are lacking. So then you shift over to the inferior ways of love, such as becoming angry or shocked or so forth, or horror. Sometimes love affairs between two persons culminate in ghastly murder scenes. It's happening all the time in America. Such rasas are displayed between man and between animal and animal. There is no possibility of an exchange or rasa between a man and an animal, or between a man and any other species of living beings within the material world. The rasas are exchanged between members of the same species. But as far as the spirit souls are concerned, they are one qualitatively with the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the rasas were originally exchanged between the spiritual living being and the spiritual whole, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual exchange or rasa is fully exhibited in spiritual existence between living beings and the Supreme Lord. So the Lord is the fountainhead of all rasas. And the living being, when they exchange these rasas with Krishna, then the living being becomes happy. Because Krishna is the substance, we're the category. So if we exchange these rasas with Krishna, then we become genuinely happy. And it's an indestructible happiness. So with a particular type of rasa is to be exchanged with the personality of Godhead. And only the primary rasa is experienced in full. In material existence, the rasa is experienced in the perverted form, which is temporary. And thus the rasas of the material world are exhibited in the material form of rodra, anger, and so on. Therefore, one who attains full knowledge of these different rasas, which are basic principles of activities, can understand the false representations of the original rasas, which are reflected in the material world. Yeah, just look at the movies, you see all the false rasas. But devotees, they seek to relish the real rasa in the spiritual form. In the beginning, he desires to become one with the Supreme. Thus, less intelligent transcendentalists cannot go beyond this conception of becoming one with the Supreme Whole without knowing of the different rasas. So, therefore, again, by submissively hearing this transcendental literature, one can attain the full pleasure of his or her heart's desire. But one must be very careful to hear the message from the right source. Srimad Bhagavatam is exactly received from the right source. It was brought by Narada Muni from the spiritual world and given to his disciple Sri Vyasa Deva. The latter, in turn, delivered the message to his son Srila Sukadeva Goswami. So now we see the genesis of the Bhagavatam. It started by in the spiritual world, where Narada Muni received it, and then he came and gave it to Vyasadeva, Vyasadeva to his son Sukadeva Goswami, and then so forth, Sukadeva Goswami Maharaj Parikshit, and so forth. The Supreme Lord's pastimes are more attractive to liberated souls than to mundane people. So Sukadeva Goswami was already liberated in the womb of his mom, but when he heard Srimad Bhagavatam, he was so attracted to it that he gave up staying in the womb of his mom, came out in the material world, and began to speak the Bhagavatam. So it's more attractive to liberated souls. So the subject matter is appealing to all classes of persons, including those who seek liberation and those who seek to become one with the Supreme Whole. So the parrot is known as sukha. When the ripened fruit is cut by the red beaks of such parrots, its sweet flavor is enhanced. So Sukadeva Goswami presented the Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from his father, but he's noted for his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of men. So therefore, if you know the Bhagavatam and you know how to analyze the psychology of a person, you can pick parts of the Bhagavatam that they'll be very interested in. Very interested. So once that's the foot in the door, say, for a novice. So the sincere listener that hears submissively can at once relish transcendental tastes which are distinct from the perverted tastes of the material world. So Bhagavatam comes down carefully through the chain of disciplic succession without change or disturbance. without following in the footsteps of Sukadeva Goswami, who presents this fruit very carefully by stages of transcendental realization. That is, you have to go canto by canto, slowly, not rush through it. Then you will have, you go through, you let Sukadeva Goswami lead you through different stages of transcendental realization. One should be intelligent enough to know the position of Srimad Bhagavatam by considering personalities like Sukadeva Goswami, who deals with the subject so carefully. This process of disciplic succession of Bhagavata schools suggests that in the future also Srimad Bhagavatam has to be understood from a person who is factually a representative of Srila Sukadeva Goswami. A professional man who makes a business out of reciting the Bhagavatam illegally is certainly not a representative of Sukadeva Goswami. Such a man's business is only to earn his livelihood. Therefore, one should refrain from hearing the lectures of such professional men. Such men usually go to the most confidential part of the literature without undergoing the gradual process of understanding this grave subject. They usually plunge into the subject matter of the rasa dance, which is misunderstood by the foolish class of men. Some of them take this to be immoral, while others try to cover it up by their own stupid interpretations. They have no desire to follow in the footsteps of Srila Sukadeva Goswami. One should conclude, therefore, that the serious student of the rasa should receive the message of Bhagavatam in the chain of disciplic succession from Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who describes the Bhagavatam from its very beginning, and not whimsically to satisfy the mundaner who has very little knowledge in transcendental science. Srimad Bhagavatam is so carefully presented that a sincere and serious person can at once enjoy the ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge simply by drinking the nectarian juice through the mouth of Sukadeva Goswami or his bona fide representatives. So now you know why Prabhupada translated the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the cream of Vedic literature. You don't need to read anything else. You have Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. That's it. That's the rest of your life. And it should be done systematically and slowly. And let Sukadeva Goswami lead us through different stages of transcendental realization. Hare Krishna. So our homework for next week is, you have that sheet. So you had to answer 9 questions, right? So did everyone do that? Huh? Oh, there's 5. I'm sorry, 5 questions. Yeah, there was 9 somewhere else. Okay. So it has questions, 5 questions, then it has analogies, and then there's something else also. You'll see. I'm sorry. So what is the most confidential part of the Srimad Bhagavatam? Explain why Srila Vyasadeva purposely invokes a Gayatri mantra, Dhimahi. Why does there appear to be reality in the material world? Why are the words abhigya and swarat significant? Explain how the impersonalist philosopher has given indirect impetus to the abominable mundane sex life. So everyone do, yes. Okay, go ahead, real quick. Let's give her a microphone, yeah. Go ahead, read loudly. They'll bring you a microphone. Okay. Because you also have to mention it deals with the 5 principal rasas. Okay. Explain why Srila Vyasadeva purposely invokes a Gayatri mantra, Dhimai. Anybody else? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, the Gayatri Mantra promotes you to the level where you can actually understand Krishna's intimate, loving affairs in the spiritual world. You become completely purified. Okay. So when you actually relish the pastimes of the Lord, you're actually liberated. Your mind is completely captivated by that. Everything else sort of disappears from the mind. Go ahead. Why does there appear to be reality in the material world? Yes. Yes, so things are temporarily existing. So while they're temporarily existing, they have existence, right? But if you believe that those temporary things have eternal existence, that is illusion. But if you understand while they're temporarily there, just like, if you die with $5 billion in the bank, then you're a nonsense, right? But if you spend the $5 billion before you die in Krishna consciousness, then you have good sense, right? So most people die with billions of dollars or millions of dollars in the bank, right? So that's just a sign of their ignorance. They could have done so much good with it. Right? Good. Anyway, they lose it when they die, right? So it's better that they use it properly while they're living. Yeah. Go ahead. Cognizant. Okay, that's good. Next. Explain how the impersonalist philosophers have given indirect impetus to the abominable mundane sex life. Did anybody else do this homework? Anybody else? Yeah. Okay, you want to read the next one? Did you write? You have it written down? Okay, give her the microphone. Give her the microphone. Oh, okay, go ahead, read. Read out loud. Good. Okay. So now you have your homework for next week. 6, 7, 8, and 9. So religion includes 4 primary subjects, so forth. Okay? Oh, and 10 and 11. Oh, sorry. No, that's oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, we have to do the 2 verses. Okay, but you want to look at the rest, the analogies, and there's some other things too. You have to look at all of it, not just answer those questions. you have to learn. You have to learn what those analogies are. And then you have to, and there's something else also, the third thing that you have to learn. Thank you very much. Sorry I went a little late, but still time to take rest early. There was a family in India where, I forget their name right